Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the study session of the University City Council to order at 6:00 p.m. on November 22nd, 2021. Before we turn the program over to the city manager and staff, are there any changes to tonight's agenda for the regular session? Hearing none, Mr. Rose.
Honorable Mayor and council members, this item asks that you receive a presentation from Parks and Recreation Director Darren Dunkel on proposed amendments to our park ordinances and policies. Mr. Dunkel.
Thank you, Mr. Rose, Mayor Crow, members of council. Thank you for having me here tonight to give a brief overview of our park ordinances and policies. As you may be aware, our philosophy of the department is to bring our parks to the enjoyment of the general public, and that is a valuable right of the general public to use our parks. And we intend to make all parks facilities available for various uses by various organizations and individuals. Under the conditions that there are, even though that the parks are open to the general public, there are some conditions which are specified by the ordinances and policies of the city that restricts use or gives select use to certain areas as we move forward. And under the control of parks right now by our city code, if staff wants to make a recommendation on policy or ordinance changes, those recommendations funnel through the Parks Commission for their review and consideration. And if supported by the Parks Commission, then it is forwarded on to City Council for your review and consideration as well. Right now, the city has some limited ordinances that are directly related to Parks and Recreation Forestry. As you can see on your screen, these are usually limited to the city forester and his or her role, and the role of the Urban Forestry Commission, the role of the Parks Commission, donations to parks, the closing hours and opening hours of city parks, and what public lands are designated as parks, the use of trees and shrubs. Also, we have policies here that indirectly relate to parks and recreation. These are things in general that can go into other areas as well, such as panhandling, drinking in public, selling goods and confections near schools and parks, and the distribution of news boxes. Our current ordinance on closing time for parks, staff, the Parks Commission, as well as the police department has reviewed this. Right now, our parks are open to the public basically from 5 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. at night, with the exception of Acker Park, which closes at dark. However, staff can authorize a permit until midnight for special uses, that you have a concert in a park, maybe have a concert or a tournament, those sorts of things. We can extend those hours of use. After reviewing these hours of use in the parks, staff recommends that we break it up into 3 different areas. If you look at your first area here, which includes Adams, Eastgate, Greensfelder, Welsh, Metcalf, Mooney, Raby, Ruth Park, Woods, we're looking at these parks should be open 1/2 hour prior to sunrise and 1/2 hour after sunset. The main reason behind this, and talking to the police, is that we do not have interior lights to any of these parks. So once it goes dark, it is dark. It's very hard to patrol, and you don't know what's going on and the uses in those parks. If you go to your second category, which includes Acker, Flynn, Fogarty, Heman, Kaufman, Lewis, Majerus, Millar, and the dog park, we are asking that those parks go with our current ordinance and say 5 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. And all these parks have lights in their parking lots, interior lights around trails, at tennis courts, ball fields, at the community center, Centennial Commons, the pool, and those sort of things. The last category is the Ruth Park Golf Course, which is a totally different type of operation. And we like to have that just during posted hours of operation, because as the seasons change, it stays darker later in the morning, gets darker early in the evening. When it's summer, it does the opposite. So we are asking for these changes as we move forward, and we will be bringing items forward to City Council here in the near future for those changes. Other changes that we are recommending is Section 215, 2310, and this is selling confections near schools and parks. We're really not looking for a whole lot of changes, just a few words added here and there, so such as adding in the golf course, or when you talk about being licensed, or a permitted concessionaire working on the authority of the city can provide these things. As well as the major item that we're looking for a change is category C. We have had some issues in the past, and especially since the COVID, that we have groups and individuals going out, giving private lessons, running special instructions, those sorts of things for private and commercial gain on city property, and they do not have a permit. Although this has been a loose policy for years, it's never been in an ordinance. And the Parks Commission highly recommends that we move forward with this and make this as part of this ordinance as well. The next ordinance change we're looking at is drinking in public places prohibited. Again, just some minor change to some wording on here. If you can look, that it goes for special events in the city, such as a block party. We also wanted to add in park facility rentals and special events. As of right now, we do not allow by ordinance that you can have any alcohol in any city park, public place without having a permit. And we wanted to make sure that this was covered through park facility rentals and special events, because we do have a lot of people who want to rent our facilities and have alcohol in that. The other change that we would like to make on this is the fee, because right now you do have to have a permit to be able to do this, and the cost of that is $10. And this hasn't been changed for many years. We'd like to move that up to $30 to cover administrative costs for issuing that permit. Like stated before, we have policies, and one of our main thing with policies that we make sure that our parklands and programs are conducted and well planned and directed. And although that we have a lot of management policies within the city, and especially in parks and recreation that have been developed over the years, most of these policies have never been adopted by city council. These are policies that have been created by staff, by a commission, those sorts of things. And as we move forward, we want to formalize those policies more. One of the things that we want to do is that, we have very little general park rules and regulations, which really pertain to parks and recreation. A lot of the rules and regulations maybe cover other areas, are very limited. And like I said, as we move forward, we want to develop some of these rules and regulations. One, to help out our general public and knowing what they can and can't do and what's expected of them, as well as staff knowing what we can do and what we can't do as this. And so we want to move forward with those. And we've been working on these for several years, and with the Parks Commission and staff, and trying to identify these. What we are looking to do is more formalize these rules and regulations. And they would, more of these things would fall under, such as park usage, the rules and regulations of various usage with the park, sanitation, that would include, trash, those sorts of things within the park, what you can and can't do, traffic. A lot of this relates to parking, special events, and the behavior, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable within parks, as well as merchandising, advertising, and signs within parks. A lot of this will fall more so with special event use, but also we have things on an everyday use that people want to put their cars in our parking lots, put them up for sale, those sorts of things. So how do we regulate that? As well as just various recreation activities, either activities that we run as a city, or you have outside organizations that want to come in and rent our fields and use. So we need to have those types of rules and policies. Some of these things are outlined through our city ordinances and maybe touch under certain things, but we do not have one set document that covers a lot of these rules and regulations. So with the Parks Commission's help, staff is trying to compile a list of all these things so that they are in one document, so that when we do have renters or users of our parks, They can have all that information at their fingertips. Right now, by going through all those, we're trying to cross-reference those policies that they'd like to see with current ordinances. And then some of them maybe not have ordinances, and those will be identified as well. And we are looking to bring those forward over the next couple of months for your review and consideration as well. Like I said, we have worked with the Parks Commission as well as the Police Department on reviewing these ordinances and policies. We feel that we're all on the same page moving forward on this. And at this time, I will take any questions that you have. I know we ran through this kind of quick, and I can go over anything that you may have.
Mr. Dunkel, thank you very much. To my colleagues, I'm not sure I can see your light, so you may have to give me some signals here if you would like. Mr. Smotherson.
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. A few questions that I have and just wanted to find out. First of all, the first question that I have, Mr. Dunkel, is benches in Heman Park. If you walk Heman Park, which I try to do, I'm trying to do a better job of that. There is a bus stop bench at the corner of Purdue and Midland. There is a bench at Midland and Bolson. There is a bench in front of the community center. But once you leave that bench at the community center, and I'm telling my secret, my rest stops. But anyway, once you leave that bench, there's not a bench on the olive side of Heman Park at all. So what's your recommendation in reference to solving that problem? Should I make a suggestion or submit that to the Parks Commission?
I can look into that for you, and I can see if we have any benches that we have in stock that we
Sure.
can place out there, or if it'd be something that we need to add in the future as we move forward, but I can definitely look into that for you.
Okay, all right, that's fine. I appreciate that. Now, in reference to your report, could you explain in the report you named Ackert, Flynn, Fogarty, Heman, Kaufman, Lewis, Majerus, and Millar, that those parks are open till 10:30. Could you explain to me the lighting situation in those parks? And I can't account for Ackert and Flynn. I know that Ackert has that path and that's lighted, correct?
That is correct. The pathway is lit and the upper part is lit. We are going through a renovation of that park, and there will be some other lighting added to that as well.
Okay, but in reference to Fogarty, where are the lights at Fogarty?
At Fogarty Park, they go around the trail.
The Fogarty to go around?
Yeah,
the
that was
trail?
part of the last renovation. All the lights were changed and upgraded through that
Okay,
park.
and then what about the pavilion in Fogarty? Is that lit or lighted?
I'm not for sure if the pavilion itself is lit, but I know there are lights near it, but I can look into it.
And it's important. And the reason I asked that question is because I'm hoping that the Parks Commission or you or someone in the department can make the suggestion, because lighting was a question probably in 2019 when we were holding the concert, when Arts and Letters was holding the concerts in September. And, once it got dark in Heman, where the location where the concerts were being held, it got pitch black. And that didn't, and it didn't really help that the lights were on the fields, like the soccer fields. That area where the concerts were being held was pitch black. And so that the issue of lights came up. And I don't know if that's ever been addressed in reference to Heman Park. But my question is this: why are we open to 10:30 when there are no lights in those pavilions, in those areas?
There are other areas of Heman Park that there are lights. We are looking into lighting upgrades as we speak to Heman Park to address your
Sure.
concerns earlier, and not just for the concerts in the park, but for the overall use of the park. There needs to be more security lighting there as well.
Right. So you've got a pavilion at Millard Park, you've got a pavilion at Fogarty Park. And so again, my question is, there are no lights in those pavilions.
Yeah.
So then I'm curious. I understand the trail around Fogarty, But, the question I ask is why? And I'm hoping that there are lights or considerations for lights, but I just don't understand why we're open to 10:30 and there are no lights in those parks.
Yeah. Like I said, our current ordinance states that all parks but Ackert are open till 10:30 the way it is now. What we're looking to do is change it and limit what parks can be open to 10:30 and which ones can't. But most of the parks that, like I stated, that we're listing to stay to 10:30 either have some type of lighting in there and the police feel comfortable with patrolling that. Most from a Parks and Rec standpoint, most of the concerns that we've received and people have requested, they want to keep these parks open because they do like tonight, you can look, it's right now, it's about 6:15. People are getting home from work. They still want to walk those trails. So they don't want us to be kicked out at dark. They still want to partake in those things. And the police department feels comfortable in keeping those selected parks open until 10:30. Not
Okay.
stating that we can't continue to assess and look at adding additional lighting as we move forward. But this is where we're at.
But
at this time.
again, just you understand my question.
Yes.
It's pretty dark in those parks at 9:30 and 10:30, or I would say 9:30 and 10 o'clock. So I'm not sure I understand the point of why they're open. So anyway, all right. Thank you, sir.
Other questions? Ms. Klein?
Yeah, I had a question in reference to the added requirement for the permit. If people want to give lessons, private lessons or any of that kind of thing. My question is, are there specific criteria or requirements to get that permit, or is it, anyone that applies will get one?
There's different criteria depending on what it is. If it's an athletic field, a tennis court, those sort of things. Because on tennis courts, we want to keep a certain amount of courts open for general use. And so we do limit the amount of courts that we will rent out. Athletic fields, we rent all of them out as of right now. Same way as soccer fields and like that. And it's just a general process that people go through. You have to fill out an application, and the biggest part of it are the dates and times that someone wants available. Is that certain field adequate for their age group that they want to use the field for? Are they providing an adequate amount of insurance, those sorts of things? But for the most part, most people do get their permits approved unless there is a conflict with another user group or they don't meet the criteria.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Hales?
Thank you. I just want to follow up a little bit on, I think, what Councilman Smotherson was asking. As the Park Commission weighed through this, did they consider giving any distinction to lighted areas and paths in a park versus like play equipment that might not be?
No, they've looked at right now, like I said, they looked at the overall ordinance as it states right now. Every park is open at 10:30, and this has been for years with the exception of Ackert. So basically, they wanted to keep as many parks open as they could and just limit the use of those who didn't have any lighting at all. And they felt, as well as, the police and staff looking at this, that the parks that had lights in them would provide sufficient security lighting for the general use and maybe not provide all use of the park, such as some pavilions or playgrounds at this time, but at least the trails and the parking lots for the most part are lit. And we are looking into those areas such as Heman Park back by the fields that aren't as well lit, that what we can do as we move forward. But yes, those discussions did take place looking at that.
And is that something they're going to continue to look at, or did they pass that up? It just seems to me that might be a prudent thing to look at, particularly play equipment. 30 minutes past sunset, it's pretty dark for kids to be climbing around on a jungle gym or something.
Yeah, like I said, there was discussion about it. Like I said, it's been open till 10:30 for probably the past 20, 30 years. They just wanted to put a little, not restrict that as much, but put tighter restrictions on those parks that didn't have any lighting whatsoever. And as we move forward, every year, the Parks Commission looks at priorities, what kind of projects that they want to recommend for following years, and the staff does the same thing. And one of the things that has come up over the past couple of years or so that I've been here is additional lighting needs in the parks, for overall use as well as security. And as with COVID has shown in the past, I guess, year and a half, there's more and more users in our parks than what we've had before because indoor facilities aren't open as long and those sorts of things. So we are getting more users. So there is more need for lighting and those type of activities in the parks.
Mr. McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Dunkel, for your presentation. And thank you and the Parks Commission for going through what is a very large effort of finding these policies, some that have been used, some that are on the books that may not have been used, and going through all of those systematically and kind of getting us up to speed so that we can have discussions about lighting. And we can, that might even help us drive those policy decisions about what type of lighting and change the face of the park. So that is a big job. And I know the Park Commission is really taking that seriously and each individual policy doing a really deep dive. The question I had was relating to the selling of food and whatnot inside the parks. In years past, there might have been fundraisers, let's say from a school organization, a PTO, at the music in the parks. That technically is prohibited.
Unless they have a permit. Yes.
So they can get a special event permit for that. That's the exception.
Yes. Like right now, to be able to sell alcohol anywhere, you have to have a license, those sort of things. And that's been followed as far as I know all along. But we talk about having like arts and letters, having their concerts in the parks, other groups having things in the park. If you sell alcohol or provide alcohol, you have to have the licenses. However, if you're having a family picnic or arts and letters where people show up with their coolers and drink and everything like that, the sponsoring organization is supposed to get a permit, and that permit comes through the city manager's office. And we have it already that it's been going on. People renting pavilions, they paid that extra $10 for that privilege to be able to have alcohol. And one of the biggest part of that is that permit process goes through the police department as well to review, so they know what is going on at these events, if there's going to be alcohol there or not. So it has already been happening. We just want to change a few words in there as well, since it's been so many years, just for the processing fee of that permit, change that from $10 to $30.
So the permitting process, is it tied to a specific, Arts and Letters sets up the bandstand. It's over by the place area in Heman, as Councilman Smotherman was describing. And it seemed to me that then these organizations would just set up a table. Would they have to rent a specific area of the park, or is it just a permit to allow them to do this there? Is there another permit that's maybe smaller in scope than a rental?
Yeah, there are several different permits depending on what they're doing.
Okay.
If sometimes we do have rogue groups that do show up, and we've had people try to sell stuff out of the trunks of their cars and stuff. They have not gone through any permitting process, but we do have permitting process that you have to have a city's business license. You have to have a vendor's permit, all those sorts of things if you're trying to sell or do fundraising. But most of this is geared towards just people wanting to rent a pavilion, at least from the park standpoint, people wanting to rent a pavilion, go to a concert in a park, or they want to rent the community center for a birthday party, wedding reception, and have alcohol there. From the park standpoint, that's why we just want to make these few minor changes in that.
Thank you.
Mr. Cusick.
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. Thank you, Mr. Dunkel. I have a quick question. The actual process for when residents want to use our parks and they need a permit, or they have to submit an application, is it an easy process? Is it something that has been streamlined? I do know that just recently, one of the neighborhood associations tried to get a permit to use one of the parks, and they found it very difficult, and there was some complications. So are we looking at that process to make certain that it's easier for our residents and they don't have to fill out a half a dozen forms, and it's a process that is done pretty quickly?
Yes, actually, we have been reviewing, and we will continue, as Mr. McMahon knows, in the Parks Commission, that a lot of our policies, like I said, are very old. We are going through and trying to update those, streamline those. And once we go through that process and make these changes, we will also be putting them on our website. So people can go through and download what they need and get that information as well. And as always, right now, you can get your permits through the office at Centennial Commons. And like with the neighborhoods, and I was like, if anybody has any questions or anything like that, we are glad to help and walk them through that process, which we have done numerous times.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunkel, you may not, this may be more of a statement than a question, but Acker was closed years ago just because, was that probably a safety factor years ago? When it was the one that was kind of the outlier? My guess is just judged by where it was located. Is that?
Yes, Mayor Crowe, my understanding and talking with Chief Hampton that years ago, they had some issues with
Right.
Acker Park. And so that's why that was put in
And then
place.
secondly, just because I think as the city manager will know, my phone lights up every now and then about the tennis court and tennis lessons. So if someone is, so with this new ordinance or process is going in, is there going to be something, and we can use Flynn Park, we can use Heman, I don't care which one you want to use. So there'll be something there that says, call this number, or what's it going to be?
Yes.
Because the last thing I want is for us to have this ordinance and then not have a way to implement.
Yes, Mayor Crowe. The Parks Commission has talked about this as well and what we've been waiting on. A lot of our signage at our tennis courts, again, are very old. And we want to update that signage. And we kind of been waiting to go through this ordinance change and process so that when we put out new signage, it will list the ordinance as well as it will give a phone number who they can contact to get a permit for those
Okay.
uses.
Thank you. Hearing no other questions. Thank you, Mr. Dunkel.
Thank you.
Mr. Rose, anything else on this topic?
Mayor, no, that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much. We will adjourn the study session.